All right, Tim and Kathy, what's going on? Welcome to Dad Edge. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. How about you, Larry?
I am
Good to be
doing
here,
great.
Larry.
Good to see you guys. So let's start here. Let's start with how long have you guys been married?
I'll let Kath answer that.
So February 5th, it's going to be 42 years.
42 years.
42 years.
You guys don't look old enough to be married for 42 years, but I also know that you got married really young, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 18 and Tim was 20.
That's my in-laws, by the way. They got
Yeah.
married at that. Yeah. I think probably for the same reasons, actually. So my mother-in-law, uh, surprisingly got pregnant with my wife.
Yeah.
And they ended up getting married, and my mother-in-law was 19 at the time.
Okay.
So, but yeah.
Kath was barely 18, and we were 5 months and 5 days from our first date, which we go into detail in the book.
Yeah.
From our first date to marriage, and then 7 months later, we had our first kid.
Well, tell me about this first date, because the title of your book is really catchy, by the way. But tell me about the first date.
Well, I'll give you a little
Well, I
taste
think the
of it.
title says it all,
Yeah,
right?
a little taste of it. I was kind of a promiscuous guy from how I was raised, and I wanted things to be different. And Kath was a church girl. I was really attracted to that. Her parents had been married a long time. My brother was very upset about me dating her, even because he knew my reputation was not good with girls. I promised him it was going to be different. I went and met her dad, who was a law enforcement officer with immigration, well, a guy that actually packed a gun. And I went there and knew there'd be a few questions about me taking his daughter out. I had my own house, had my own cars, that kind of stuff. And so when I went and met him, there was no intent to have sex with her on the first date. It was only to take care of his little girl and bring her home.
But let me back up to that when Tim said he had his own house and he had his own cars. That was kind of appealing to me because I was kind of looking for a husband that was going to be able to take care of me and would provide for me. And so him being a man, like I say that he was like the first man I ever dated.
And I was
At
flex
least
my
I,
arms when she says that.
yeah, at least I thought he was a man.
We do marriage events all across the country, and we share parts of the story in that. And when she says that, I always flex my arms. And say, you got that right, babe.
Yeah. He was not a man.
I was a boy, and when I do men's conferences and do men's events all over the country, as I have in the past, I always tell guys I never became a man until I was 47 years old. I was a boy. I just had not grown up to be a man because I was doing childish things.
What was this the wake up call?
Oh
No. The wake up call took till I was 47 years old. That was the wake up call. So we'd been married 27 years before I had a wake up call that brought me to my knees.
Wow. So
there was a few along the way, but for the major wake up call to happen was 27 years into our marriage.
I wasn't listening. I would just work harder and do more things to make myself more comfortable.
So let me ask you this. So you guys met obviously very young, right? You had a date that maybe didn't go in the direction you wanted to, or maybe it did go in the direction that you wanted to. But tell us about that very first date, this very first interaction. I'd also just really love to know, what was it about each other that attracted you to each other just when you guys were so young?
Well, for me, the attraction was Kath's looks. I thought she really looked good. Didn't know her on the inside at all. Didn't know much about her. Just her family. I was attracted to that. I met her mom and dad, and I saw her mom, which was 20 years older than me, and I saw what I was going to get when Kath was 40. So I thought that was attractive to me too. And I wanted somebody really good looking, that smelled good, and would take care of all my needs and give me all the sex I wanted. And I wanted it to be somebody good looking. So it was really more about looks and external things than anything else. But her being in a family was very attractive to me. And Kath's reasons for me were way different.
Yeah, like I said, I was looking for someone who was going to be able to take care of me. I was a senior in high school, and pretty much that's what was going to happen, was I was going to find a man and get married. And so Tim was appealing to me because he looked like he could probably provide for me, and so I was attracted to that. And the first date, I mean, it's kind of how the hookup culture is now. That's pretty much what happened with our first date. And
And we did it wrong. It wasn't right what we
no,
did.
and we know if we could go back and change that, we definitely would, but we can't, and it's part of our story.
I shook her dad's hand and told her I'd take care of his daughter, asked him what time he wanted her home. And we left and went from Vancouver, Washington to Portland, Oregon to Old Town Pizza. And I had fake ID and I bought a pitcher of beer. And I was a person that drank beer all the time or even hard alcohol. So I had a high tolerance. And little did I know, after about a half a glass of beer, Kath was pretty giggly. And so we were literally, after pizza and beer, we were hanging on each other when we left the pizza parlor. And that was our first date. And then we went to the drive-in movie. And then you go to the drive-in and you have a 6-pack of Schlitz malt liquor in the back seat and some marijuana in the glove box, and you know those two things where you're going to end up, back in the back seat, which is what happened.
So, and did you get her home on time?
Yes,
You did. Okay.
did
So you
that part
didn't,
right.
so you didn't actually come to the front door with like a firearm, at your face or anything
No.
like that. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure her mom and dad were in bed, and Kath went in and checked out, and that was how it worked.
Well, that was the other thing too that I was wondering, were your parents, did they know that you'd been drinking? But I guess were they
Uh,
asleep by the time you got home?
yeah, they were asleep. I pretty
Okay.
much, when I would check, and this wasn't the first time I had drank. So it wasn't like Tim had totally corrupted me. I mean, I was a drinker. I would party with friends and and I was pretty promiscuous before. But what Tim's appeal to me was that I was a church girl, and what that meant to him is that I went to church. And so that didn't change really my how I acted. I had no relationship with God. So I wasn't, what he was attracted to was not even real. It was kind of just what he saw.
And that church girl, I thought, would potentially change some of the ways of my living, who I was as a young man, trying to do things different and more
Mhm.
honorable. I mean, I felt like had honor in how I did business, but how I did life in general. Once I had a few beers in me and a joint or two, smoking some pot, I was a little different. It made me different. And I can tell you that night that was kind of crazy. I went home to my house. My roommate was there, and we drank a beer and had a bong hit. And I told my roommate Brian, I said, "This is the girl I'm going to marry." That was our very first night. But Kath didn't know that for how long?
Yeah, it was interesting when we started doing marriage ministry and we were doing one of our events, we were sharing about our first date, and Tim told me that in front of this group of people, and I looked at him and I was like, I've never heard that before. That would have been cool to hear.
This was about the 35-year mark
Yeah,
of our marriage when I finally told her
when he finally
that.
told me that. I didn't know he
Wow.
felt that way on our first date.
Yeah, I'm so curious as to, why you were attracted to a church girl. I mean, you did answer to some degree, but I'm really, really curious. Was there something in your family and your upbringing, Tim, that was maybe missing that you were wanting? Maybe it was that stability. Maybe it was a foundation of some sort.
Well, Larry, my mom was married 9 times, and my dad was married 4. Actually, he's with his 5th gal now, and they're not married, but he feels like they're married, and they have this relationship, and we like her. But my mom and dad, there was no church, and there was no relationship with God, no relationship with Jesus. None of that was going on whatsoever. And I can tell you, my mom's second husband, my mom and dad divorced when I was a year old. And then my mom's second husband abused me physically. And then her third husband thought I should get baptized. I didn't know what I was doing, so I got baptized. Then her fourth husband abused me also, and also mentally abused me, and he thought I should get baptized too in the Mormon church. So they were all trying to change me for the better. And then ultimately, at age 12, my grandparents adopted me because my mom met a guy that didn't want kids. And my dad signed off of that, and my mom gave me up for adoption to my grandparents. That's why I have the name Bush. And then my grandpa taught me my work ethic, a lot of really good things, but he also taught me how not to be with a woman. He wanted me to sow my wild oats, and a lot of them. And he was kind of my cheerleader in that aspect of that, not just in the work ethic, but also in the woman ethic of the ethics of a woman. And he even told me, someday you're going to be married to somebody like your grandma the rest of your life. You're going to be stuck. You need to make sure and sow all your wild oats now. And that was his advice. and there was absolutely no church during that time. So I was attracted to something. I didn't know what, but I was attracted to the stability of Kath's family. And I knew that meant her going to church. I had a couple other girls I was interested in before Kath that were church girls, and they might be interested in me, but other people kind of saved them from me because they could see through me right away. So I ultimately every relationship would end up like it did with Kath on the first date or a few dates later.
Wow. So just out of curiosity, do you still talk to your mom and dad? Are they still with us?
Well, my mom passed away a few years ago. My pop passed away around 18 years ago, and my dad is still alive. My Grams passed away too. So my dad's one, and we have a good relationship now. It's really funny because we didn't hardly see each other all through growing up until I was given up for adoption, and his biggest concern was the $50 a month it cost in child support. So he was relieved of that, and then not till I had kids later and was married he wanted to come back into my life, but we've totally reconciled. We're good now. Uh, we see each other maybe once or twice a year, talk on the phone probably once a month. Uh, so I wouldn't say we're extremely close, but we are good, if that makes sense.
Mm.
I
How,
chose, I chose to love him no matter what.
yeah. Well, me and you both, we have very similar, you and I have a very similar background, minus the grandfather who cheered me on for dating or sowing my oats. He was not on board with that one, but he definitely taught me a lot, really took me under his wing. My mom was married 3 times. My dad's been married twice, but I didn't meet my biological father till 18 years ago. And my oldest son is going to be 18 here soon. So, I mean, I knew him, I met him once when I was 12, but it was a very small, really quick relationship that didn't last. And then I ran into him at, by accident in a coffee shop 18 years ago. And same as you, we've made amends, and, we're moving on with our relationship and things are good. But, I'm curious, with your own kids now, and I know that this is more of a question for Tim. When your kids ask you about your upbringing, what do you tell them?
We've told them everything. They know it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
We're complete open book to our kids. And
We're kind of a complete open book to everyone now that we've written our story.
And we did
Yeah.
it. We did this out of obedience. We have to do this because of what happened in our marriage. As you find out in the book, there is just absolutely no way we should be married. We did everything possible not to be married, with the exception of saying at the same time we both wanted a divorce. Kath always says,
And that's what we say is the reason we didn't get a divorce, because there was never a day that we both said, let's get a divorce. There was always one of us that was wanting to fight for our marriage for those 27 years.
Mhm.
It's unreal.
It
That
is
was
unreal.
that was one of my questions, was how are you guys not divorced? Because I know there's been a ton of personal baggage that you both brought to your relationship. You guys were married incredibly young. There was cheating, there was alcohol, there was drugs, there was lying. On paper, your relationship should not have survived that at all. In fact, I'm sure you guys get emails all the time. I was just talking about this on another podcast that I did, where I used to get on average about one email per week from a listener of the show. And it always was the same theme. Hey man, can I join the mastermind? Like my wife just told me that she's done, or our marriage is ending, or she wants to separate, or she wants to go live in a separate home, or like it was always that theme, like where a guy had a 911. And lately, I would say the past 6 to 8 months, I've gotten 2 to 3 a week. So it's now almost an every other day thing. And I was just going back and forth with a guy named Jason this morning about, like, hey man, like I want to be a part of your group. I don't really want to focus on marriage too much because that relationship's pretty much bagged. There's no coming back from it. It's terrible. I just want to focus on being a dad. So I pressed this guy a little bit harder, and I was like, well, tell
Just
me
like I
more
was.
about, yeah. I was like, tell me more about your marriage. And then he went in, out of time for you guys in the show, he went into a lot of detail. And to be honest, I responded to his story and I said, I need your permission to be very blunt and direct with you. Do I have that? And he said, yes. So I'm actually waiting to get back to him. But basically what he did is he told the story of every reason why this relationship will not work. And I have found that, and it's interesting that you guys had the experience you did, that there was always somebody willing to fight, right? So there was maybe in your journey of being married, there was always one person of like, this is not going to work anymore. And there was another person that was standing in the fire saying like, no, I want to work on it. I'm willing to work on it. Right. But I find that it's really interesting that the story that we buy into as an individual, as a parent, someone who takes care of their health and fitness, someone who takes care of their finances, someone who is a patient parent or not, and how we go about marriage is the story that we tell ourselves. I did that, and I'll be very honest with you guys. I did that the first 10 years of my marriage with my wife, and I basically, I identified as someone who didn't communicate well. I identified with someone who was stubborn and wasn't willing to have a whole lot of patience or grace for our relationship and that kind of thing. And I look back on that and I'm like, my gosh, man, that story was probably one of the biggest dividers actually in our relationship. It wasn't until I opened myself up to new possibilities, new potential, and a new story that this thing could actually work again. Like my wife, actually, God bless her, she was the one who is steady. She was the one who is the foundation. She was the one who was always willing to fight no matter what. And sometimes I scratch my head, be like, why were you willing to fight? And she'll joke with me now. She's like, I really don't know. Like, God bless, you were hard. I was like, I was.
Neither one of us were steady. Imagine
Yeah,
that.
that had to be hard. But
For almost
so
3 decades.
was that, I mean, do you guys really, let me ask you this. So do you look at your relationship now and say the reason we aren't divorced is because there was always one of us that were willing to fight for it, or were there more things going on?
Well, there's a bigger plan, and we didn't know about that
Yeah.
plan. That was definitely fighting for our marriage and doing that. We have an enemy of the world. It's called Satan. He was fine with our marriage struggling the way it was. That could last forever as far as he's concerned. It wasn't until we started coming out of that and doing well that we found that we really found out we had an enemy of the world.
Well, and I think the theme for Tim and I is that we were always searching for something better.
Yep, lots of things.
And our kids can attest to that because they always saw mom and dad doing something and diving into it and giving it our all.
And they talk about that in the videos.
Yeah, and then
it
would fizzle out. And so that's when we put Jesus in there, our kids were like, is this the next thing? When is this going to fizzle out? But that's what Tim and I, we were always searching for something. And, we were in and out of counselors. And I do think.
And we went to counselors, at least I went for Kath to get fixed. I thought I was like most guys. Most guys were like me that's how messed up I was.
Tim never said what was going on with him.
I didn't even tell the truth to the counselors. Let's just take my wife in and fix her.
I laid it all out there. I told the truth. I figured we're spending money here. We want help in our marriage, and I'm going to tell the truth. I never dreamed that he wasn't telling the truth.
Not till I got brought to my knees did I let the truth out.
Yeah.
Because
tell me about that. So tell me about that experience. What happened?
Well, we go into a lot of detail in the book. We don't even have an hour. Wouldn't be long enough.
That's why people want to read our book to hear the details.
Yeah,
give them the overlay.
And the overlay in 2008, my little brother Ned was in July was diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma, and he was helping me build my own kingdom here on earth. Meaning, I was building buildings, I was building a new car dealership. I had all these things going on, and he was helping me. And he had a daughter and a wife, and the doctor gave him just months to live in July of 2008. And then a little bit after that, our nephew passed away at 22 years old, also left a wife and a daughter. And at his funeral, things started to come apart for me. And if you remember right, in 08, the economy kind of changed, and I was building all those buildings, and the bank that I was dealing with went into receivership. So by the month, well, first off, in November, my brother went into hospice. And in December, I went through a month of literally no sleep. And by January rolling around, I was contemplating suicide and taking both prescription and illegal drugs and drinking up to a fifth of hard alcohol a day just to stay somewhat okay. And I was completely filled with anxiety, completely filled with depression, completely not able to work for the very first time in my life, completely succumbed to nothing. I was literally not wanting to live. And then my brother died in February of 2008. And I'd been going to a counselor, and my counselor thought it had something to do with my brother's dad who abused me. So he gave me some tools to deal with that. And I did exactly what he said. And I felt better from that. And I said, but I'm still suffering anxiety. He says, there's some other things you're not telling me. And then I told him about all the infidelity that I had done over the years with Kath, and he knew she didn't know that. He said, "Well, you're going to need to tell her."
Oof.
And, and
Is that what was keeping you awake, do you think? Do you think it was a culmination of all of these factors, or do you
it's
think
a
it
combination
was
of all
just
the above: business, not being able to take care of my family, thinking of suicide, my brother dying, our nephew dying,
But
all those.
carrying all those lies for 27 years
It was so heavy,
that he never told me about.
and I had
That was the icing on the cake.
And I had somebody I really trusted tell me, "You take these kind of things to the grave. You never talk about them." And I really trusted this man, and so that was bad advice because I was thinking I needed to start figuring some of this out and talking about it. But I wasn't willing to let it go because I knew, and I told him, I said, I'm going to lose Kath. I'm going to lose her. He said, well, you might, but you're going to lose your life if you don't get this out of you. This is toxic. And that counselor, I love that guy for this because I literally went home and told Kath, and
how did you tell her? Like what, like, did you
Kath,
like,
I
hey, how was your day? By the way, can you sit down? I got a couple things to tell you.
I said I have at this point, Kath's doing her own business. She's very confident with her life. I knew I was going to lose her. I was very dependent on her for the first time in our marriage after 27 years. And I said, I have some things I got to tell you, and you're not going to like them. And anything from multiple one night stand affairs to some that lasted a while to one that lasted over 20 years. And so also to one that I might even have a child from. So there's a lot of things that we talked about that took over 2 hours. And at the end of me telling her, she kept on asking me, is that all? Is that all? Is that all? And then finally I said, yeah, I think that's all. And I got up to hug her, and she stuck her hands out and said, "Oh, no, no, don't hug me right now, but I want you to know I'm not going to go anywhere." And
What did that mean to you?
well, that wasn't the biggest thing. She was recommended by another family member that she might want to consider leaving me because when I was so sick. And this is after I told her this stuff. And the family member came over, which I love, and and Kath said, "Hey, this is what I was told, but I want you to know, if we lose everything, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to stick with you, and I want you to know." I didn't know it then, but I know it now. I believe that's the first time I ever saw Jesus was through my wife. He actually spoke right through my wife, and it gave me enough life to go to the next day. How about
Kath,
that?
Kath, what was that like hearing that and then somehow standing in the fire of all that and then saying, I'm not going to leave? Did you feel like that there was maybe divine intervention in your response, or did you, or were you, maybe there was a part of you that maybe wasn't totally surprised?
Oh, yeah, both of that.
Okay.
And as Tim was talking about how sick he was and experiencing anxiety and depression, and
Go sleep.
he at this point is pretty much home all the time. He's following me around. I'm kind of being his, I'm taking care of him at this point. And so our relationship went from 27 years of Tim trying to control me to now Tim has no control. So I have stepped up in the marriage. I'm caring for Tim. And so when he comes home and he starts telling me these things, it's actually like there isn't a moment there's not any part of me that's thinking I'm going to leave him. And it's actually like our marriage kind of starts to make sense. Like all these things that he's telling me, because there was infidelity on my part, but anytime
Right.
that would happen, I would tell him. And so it kind of like everything kind of made sense. And I actually thought, you know what, we can actually finally start healing now that everything is out. So I was really grateful for that. I mean, of course, I was angry, I was hurt, but I do think there was definitely divine intervention, and it was God's timing for him to tell me it. But I wasn't going to leave him. I knew that we could build something from here, that there was hope.
And Larry, we
Yeah.
had we had 4 or 5 businesses.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was a workaholic. and all of a sudden I couldn't work. And I told Kath, you're going to have to talk to the kids because I can't talk to them even. I can't talk to anybody.
You couldn't talk to bankers, and I had to, yeah, I had to grow up and step up at this point of our marriage.
And,
She
and
told the she told the kids I couldn't work anymore.
how many years in the marriage was this?
27.
So
27,
this was the 27-year mark that you were, okay.
27-year mark. Yep.
So Kath, on your end, I know your history. You actually met a man that you had an affair with that you actually thought maybe it's for a certain season or a certain minute or whatever that he was going to be a better fit for you.
Oh yeah.
So
And that was probably at the what year mark?
That would have been at the 9-year mark.
9-year mark. And I definitely felt like I married the wrong person. I fell in love with this man. He was totally different than Tim. And I felt like that I just was that at that point I was ready to leave Tim. And I told Tim, I don't want to be married to you anymore. I love this guy. And yeah, that was a defining moment in our marriage and how Tim handled it. And that was another God thing that God put a pastor into our life that spoke truth to us. And Tim's controlling nature at that point, he let me go.
I didn't totally handle it so well because they did the manly thing. I called her parents.
Yeah,
I said,
at
you guys
first.
need to deal with
Yeah, he told
with
on
this.
me.
Kath's got a boyfriend and she doesn't love me anymore. And you guys need to figure this out
Yeah.
because
That was his response.
yeah.
how did the parents respond to that one?
Well, it was really cool. The pastor that married them up in North Idaho happened to be in the same town we were.
Mm.
And from 25, 30 years before when he married him. And he just happened to do marriage counseling. And I'm going to tell you, it was one of the larger churches in our area. And I called him and told him who I was. And he just welcomed me in that day. And we talk about this in detail in the book, but he literally, and we at all of our marriage conferences that we do all across the country, we talk about this because it's really a profound story on how he counseled us. And 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 he literally, it was the very first man I ever prayed with, and I thought that was really weird because he touched me, he held my hand and stuff like that. I thought that was weird. I was too proud of a guy to let another guy do that at that point. But he also told me to let Kath go and I talk more in details about it in the book. But that's ultimately I went home and let her go, and she came back. And he said that that's the only way it might work, because if I go home and control her and try to keep her, I'm going to lose her. That's an
Kath, how,
overview.
Kath, how long did this last, this relationship?
It was not that long. Tim's always good with the dates and the time periods.
I'd say it was
would
2 or
forget.
3 months. 2 or 3 months.
It wasn't very long, but after
This
the
guy was a
fact,
friend of mine, great friend, right?
and after the fact, after I broke it off with him, I still had feelings for him for a long time, because the problem is with the kind of the cycles of Tim and me, we would go get counseling, we'd get a fix, but we weren't doing that interior work. And we had no relationship with Jesus Christ that was the ultimate change for us. So all of these things we did during those 27 years were like a little fix here and a fix here, and nothing
Kinda
was
like
lasting.
That's
That's why
band-aids along the way.
yeah,
Lots of
this
Band-Aids.
was a Band-Aid.
Some bigger, some smaller.
So Tim let me go for a short period, but then he took back control in the marriage, and that happened again. And then I would go outside the marriage again to get my control. And we went through this crazy cycle for years.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, but can I jump ahead and just ask you a question about present day?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
We love talking about it now.
Yeah. So you guys so I always like to have conversations like this as if I'm thinking about like if I was friends with you guys, or like if I were to know you for a long period of time, or like if Jess and I were to go out to dinner with you guys, like what would be my impression? My impression of you guys is that you guys love each other. Like the way you can, like I really watch, guests, especially when I have more than one, and see how they interact. Like you guys look at each other when the other person's talking, the other person will actually look and listen. Like you can tell like you're very engaged with each other, very, very close, right? Even the way you're both are sitting, right? And like your shoulders are touching and that kind of thing. But you seem like you're more in love today than, and I'm just guessing, than maybe you ever have been. And if that's true, uh, Is there a part of you, like, let me ask this, and maybe this is spiritual warfare at its best, right? Are there ever times in your relationship where Kathy, you'll look at Tim, or Tim, you'll look at Kath, and you'll be like, oh God, you really raked me over the coals several years ago. It was really, really tough. I love you now, but maybe there's like just somewhat of an internal battle, or would you say, hey, the slate is wiped clean, like we're done with that, and we are now, this is a renewed relationship. I don't look at her that way. She doesn't look at me that way. It's just good. Or is there still a bit of a battle going on there?
Well, I loved how you said, is the slate wiped clean? And for Tim and I, we are totally new creations. So the slate is clean. But I want to say to that too, you know, those sins and the things that we did to each other, they never go away, and there's consequences. And so there will be times, especially writing this book, you know, as we were writing this book and bringing up the details, and it's hard. It's really hard.
Whenever we do a marriage conference or I do a men's event or a men's 10-week study, uh, there's a part where I'll talk about past sin consequences, and I'll tell the guys, and I'll even use 3 examples in those past sin consequences uh, after sharing our story. And because there is consequences, the things you did, they happened, and there's other people involved. So you never know whether that kid's going to show up from in your past or something's going to happen from in your past. However, we are good and we know we're forgiven and we've forgiven each other. And, maybe there'd be a tinge of something that would come up and say, that particular situation reminds me of something that happened 20 years ago because it happened. But it's real easy to overcome it, especially when we talk about it. And I would say, "Man, that reminds me of that." And Kath goes, "Oh, that's really dumb, but I understand it." But and we can talk about it. We can talk about anything because we don't let any blocks get between us that would cause a wall.
Well, and it's interesting. We have some really good friends, and she was just saying, you know, it's so, you guys are so incredible. We go out to dinner with you, and you'll start maybe telling some stories, and it'll come up this girlfriend or that boyfriend, and she goes, and the way you guys handle it, we can just tell that you're not holding any of that against each other, and we share all that we share so that people will open up to us. And I think the thing we hope for the most is for people to realize in their marriage that you cannot carry secrets. You can't have secrets between you. And that's why we're at where we're at right now. And I would say our marriage is thriving.
Mhm.
It's not perfect, but it's thriving. And that's because we want it to thrive.
And Larry, we 100% believe that not just 99%, every marriage is salvageable. Everyone,
You just literally took, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kath.
Because of God.
because of God.
Because of
Yeah.
God.
And with some tools. You have to work.
Yeah.
To have a marriage, it takes a little bit of
It's
work.
work.
Just like
Yeah.
your car does and your house does and your education and your job, all those things take work. Well, your marriage usually gets a back burner, and that's why divorce is so high.
I agree. I think that's actually where I was going to go next. Was I want you to talk to the couples, or most importantly the men listening to this show, because I'll be really honest. I answer these emails now 2 or 3 times a week from just random listeners who listen to the show about their relationship. And to be quite honest, I love the fact that a total stranger is emailing me, which is another total stranger, and opening up his entire life and his marriage. Like this guy, Jason, this morning, like literally wrote me like 7 paragraphs. Like when I asked him, tell me more about what's going on here, I literally got like this dissertation. I was like, wow. But in that, but I also, I'm very blunt with these guys because I was there too, right? I mean, our relationship, like Tim, your background with the way you were raised was very similar to mine. And it's fascinating that the reason I asked you about the church girl and all that other stuff with Kathy was because the thing that attracted me so much to my wife, number one, she's just hotter than she's very hot. I always thought that too. Like I always like just kind of
Hope you're
funny
telling her
story.
that. Hope you're telling her that a lot.
Right. Just to kind of like a funny story. Like when I was in college, I was a sophomore when I met my wife. She was a freshman. And my friends used to give me so much crap because like I was one of those guys that I was just like, if I liked a girl or if I was attracted to her, I had no problem just going up to her and talking to her. Like I was just very open about that, like very, and I was confident about it. With her, I was terrified, like terrified. And my friends thought it was fascinating to give me crap. Like I saw my wife around campus for months and they'd be like, "Hey, Hagner, when are you gonna go talk to that girl?" So for the longest time, she was known as that girl. Well, then I got to know her. And not only was she beautiful and still is so beautiful, but like same thing with you. Like this is kind of funny because it came up again, like literally since it was the holidays. Because the boys, we have four boys, they're 17, 16, 10, and 7. So a couple of the boys were asking, like, how'd you meet mom again? Like, when did you meet mom's family? Because my wife comes from a huge family. And her mom had her at 19. So when I met her mom, she was like 38 years old. And when I saw her at Thanksgiving dinner with about 50 of her other relatives, and it was the first time I ever met her mom, ever met her dad, and I saw this woman, and I was like, man, I was like, I wonder which aunt that is or what cousin that, because I thought her mom was striking. And I joke with her all the time. I was like, I thought your mom was hot first time I met her. Like,
I've said that. I've said
I know,
that
right?
so many times.
And my mother-in-law and I still joke about it to this day. And when she introduced me to her mom, I was like, I was like, oh my God, I thought that was your cousin. Like, I thought that was your aunt. I did not think that was your mom. But here's the cool thing about this. I'll get to my point. My wife was raised like a church girl, right? Her mom was really into her faith, and so was her dad. And like no one in her family, and I don't even know how many generations back, not one person in my wife's family for at least 4 generations that we know of have ever been divorced. Not one. Crazy. And when I saw this family and how connected they were, not just to the immediate family, but to the extended family, and how close my wife's relationship was with her parents, and like how her parents just like welcomed me in, and like how I grew up was the opposite of that. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the coolest thing ever. Like my wife and I had been through, we dated for 7 years before we got married, and we broke up a few times. And I remember when we broke up, one of the biggest things that I would actually miss was her family, like being around that family. And that was really, really hard. So like, going back to like how you guys met and like why you were attracted to her, like I relate to that 100%. But getting back to like these relationships where people are just like, you know what, it's not salvageable, it's not fixable, it's not this, it's not that. I don't buy into that anymore.
Me
And
neither.
I haven't
We
for
don't
a
either.
long time. But I want you to, I have my own take on that. And I don't even want to waste time sharing mine. I would love for you to talk to the men who are listening to this show right now. And they're like, Tim, Kath, Lair, like my relationship's not fixable. It's just not. And I don't buy into that. And I get the feeling you don't either. But what advice would you give them to
Well,
start?
the first thing I would tell a guy, he needs to get into an accountability group and be talking to some other men that not in divorce care. I'm talking about talking to some other men that are married and been around the track a few more times than them, and get them to advise them, and maybe even ask them to mentor you, or at least one of them. And I can tell you, in my accountability group 12 years ago when I got into it, we had some questions we asked, and one of the questions was, "Are you praying with your wife every day?" And I want you to know that everybody in that group, and that group's still going. The 5 guys that are in there now. I know them all. They're all in some ways connected to us across the country in ministry, doing marriage ministry, doing men's stuff. But it's really cool relationships, and those expand far beyond that group. But I can tell you that everybody in that group, when they start out praying with their wives, is 0 days.
I can see that.
And it's mostly because guys are, first off, they don't know how to do it, and they have so much pride, they're not willing to say they don't. And we all are filled with pride, and we need to get past that. But I can tell you the statistics in divorce, and this is a Barna study. 50% get divorced. We know that. And it kind of stays the same because people aren't getting married. Because why get married when we just live together instead of getting divorced? That's why it stays at 50. The new study says 25, 26%, if you're going to church consistently, get divorced. Still, going to church doesn't fix it. But the biggest statistics to me is if you're praying with your wife consistently, which means every day, the rate goes down to 1 in 1,155 marriages get a divorce. Now, that's not a trip to Cabo. That's new diamond rings, not a new car, not a new house. That's praying with your spouse consistently every day. And it's so easy. We model it at every one of our marriage events now. We make it so simple, and we could do it right here on the podcast too.
Do you mind?
No, I don't, because what I would
I,
do is
yeah.
I wish you were there with your bride, because Kath would have her do it. But how we do it, we make it this simple. God doesn't care how eloquent your prayers are, but go, and I would ask you to even do this with your wife. So I would say, Larry, I want you to grab your wife's hand, and I want you to make it really easy. Lord God, thank you for the gift of my bride. In Jesus' name, amen. And then I would have you do it. Then Kath would do it to the
Then I
women.
would have your wife grab your hand or say to you, I thank God for the gift of my husband. And just start with that basic prayer for your spouse to hear that they're a gift. It's a great way. And we did that at our last marriage conference, and I went in the
We've done it before that.
Yeah, we've done it many times, but we did it at our last one. And I went into the bathroom shortly after, and there was a young girl in there, and she looked at me and she says, my husband has never prayed with me. I have wanted him to pray with me. And you guys did that exercise, I looked at him and said, are you going to do it? And she said, and he did it. And she started crying. And she said, that's the very first time we've ever prayed together. I want you guys to do that again.
And in that same conference, Larry, it was so huge. I looked over at a pastor's wife, one of the pastor's wives that were there, and she started tearing up. And because I believe in a lot of cases, even in the church, the pastors are not praying with their wives. I'm not talking about dinner. You don't get a pass at that. I'm talking about inviting the Holy Spirit into your marriage, just the two of you with the Holy Spirit in the center. And we believe without a doubt, if you do that, your marriage is going to last and go the long haul.
I can see that.
What's interesting, when Tim and I, shortly after we gave our lives to Christ, the pastor who was at the church that baptized us told Tim that he needed to start praying with me. And so Tim came home and he says, Mel says we need to pray or I need to pray with you. So Tim would pray. So
for about 10 months.
For about 10 months, Tim would pray and I would just listen. And finally, after 10 months, I looked at him and I said, when you get done praying, can you not say in Jesus' name? So in case I want to add something to our prayers. And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, I can do that. So we started praying then.
And we've been praying ever since. In fact, I can tell you, we never miss a day in our our marriage goals. Those are the non-negotiable goals that we pray together every day.
Now, sometimes when we're not getting along and Tim tries we need to pray together bit, and I'm like, no, we're not praying right now. I say,
okay, well, I'll do it then. and I do. But Larry, this is really simple too, because I do a pheasant hunt every fall in South Dakota. I call Kath every day, and I pray with her on the phone. There is absolutely no reason I can't pray with God's daughter and make it important, because I think it's important to God. So that, and sometimes we pray long, sometimes we pray short. We have more intentional things we put in our prayers now than we used to, and it has grown. But I can tell you so many times, I've actually been the man and told the guy to be his wife and modeled it with him. And he's gone home. These are friends of mine that are in their 50s or 60s. And they went home and he calls me that night. I did it. And he's crying on the phone. I said, what happened? My wife started crying. She said she's been waiting for that for decades. I mean, we're made for that.
That is unreal. Was it, let me ask you this. It's a really dumb question, because I think I know what you're going to tell me, but let's just say that, so I'm very much a faith-based person myself. I mean, that's why I wrote the book that I did that we were talking about before we hit record. And do you think that for someone who's not spiritual or doesn't believe in God, do you think that it's possible to save their marriage with earthly tools?
Totally is very easy. We believe you need to have that salvation moment. You're going to need that, and you're going to have to figure out how to get there. But there's people that,
or God's going to figure it out
for you. But I think those people that are not saved, and even the people that are saved, if you don't do those things, you really need to look at what's at stake. And you look at your kids and say, man, our kids are beautiful. I hope they know Jesus. Oh my gosh. Why would you hope? Why don't you just do? But it's not even about them. What about their grandkids that you're not even going to know? And this is in our book. And this is chapter 20, actually, the stake you put in the ground. What if it impacted people you didn't even know? How important is that? You talk about 5 generations of marriages not failing. there had to have been an invasion of the Holy Spirit for that to happen. That has to be a faith-based from coming from behind. But
Yeah.
in order for that to continue, it has to continue. But when you start looking at about generational changes that you make right now that may impact generations you never meet, it's so important, and you can't wait. You just can't wait because the impact, it's going to impact kids, grandkids, great grandkids, 5 generations down. Things that you do today.
So I have a question for Kath on this. So Kath, you wrote in the book that Tim used to be controlling, right?
Yeah.
So I really have a two-part question when it comes to the experience of praying together. Number one, when he started praying with you, did you run that through the lens of he's trying to be controlling again, even though this is a good thing, maybe he's trying to be controlling again? And if the answer to that is no, I really welcomed it, then great. My second question is, what changed with him being controlling over the years?
Well, the controlling issue was kind of a sudden thing, and that's when God took him to his knees. I mean, he lost control. I saw him lose control. He's still. I mean, it's not a. Tim's a strong man, and he's a leader, but it's not a control. I mean, I feel like his partner. I mean, we're in this marriage together. I feel more of a partner than I ever have. But when he asked me, when he talked about praying, no, I totally welcomed it. You know, the first godly thing that Tim actually did was when he came to me and he asked me if I would start reading the Bible with him. And that was because a friend of his, when Tim was at the end of his rope, suggested he started reading the Bible. And so a couple weeks after that, Tim came to me and said, would you consider reading the Bible with me and starting in Proverbs? And we'll read a chapter a day. And I'll tell you, I tell everyone, like, this is the sexiest thing Tim ever did. That was the first godly way that Tim led us. And the thing is
That's something for the dudes to hear, right?
I'm
and
telling you.
for any woman, God created all of us, whether you've given your life to Christ or not. We're all created by God, and there is a place in there that welcomes that godly leadership. So if there's a husband out there that he's battling with his wife not being a Christian, and maybe he is, and she still is going to long for that. So welcoming, I mean, a woman is going to welcome that godly leadership because we are created that way. So, but yeah, it was the sexiest thing that Tim has ever done, still to this day. And we read the Bible together, not together, but if most days, because we're together most days, but we read the Bible every day. That's like a non-negotiable. We have got to be fed, and we're not going to go back to the place we were at. So we do that.
So I really love to break down some things here as far as what we would call, the divine intervention or the foundation of having Christ at the center of your marriage, right? I think we definitely have that. Sounds like for you guys, one of the couple of the non-negotiables are we pray together as a couple every day. We read the Bible together or separately every day. That's a non-negotiable. From a Christ perspective, are there other practices besides those two that are non-negotiables in your life as a couple?
Well, for us, boundaries is the number one thing that comes to my mind. We have boundaries with the opposite sex. We have my phone, my computer, Kath's phone, her computer are totally open to us 24/7. I have nothing to hide. Kath has nothing to hide. Those and those are probably, I would say, the main things. We do things more where we include each other, ask each other more questions about things, and we pray about the things. Kath hears my heart, and she goes, "Talk to me more about what you were praying about."
Yeah.
and I hear that too. So you'll hear each other's hearts. So that really opens up that communication, and we talk about everything. And sometimes we'll get short with each other, and why'd you get short with me? And then we talk about that. So
Well, and I know too, us being in fellowship with other believers is really important.
mhm.
That's important to us. Serving God, and that's why we do what we do. That's why we wrote this book.
Yeah.
We literally travel all over the country to serve these marriages, and like we told you earlier, Larry, we do it out of obedience,
Yeah.
and we do it because of what God did in our marriage, and we know the couples that we're speaking to are going to want to uptick their marriage. Well, you'll see it in one of our videos in the book, but every marriage conference we go to, couples come in, probably not even holding hands most of the time, not touching each other. They're on their cell phones. By lunchtime, that's over because people start seeing some tools and wow, and they start moving closer together. And then by the end of the day, they're just one day, they're holding it. Now we realize that's not going to be sustainable. That one day, they're going to have to put it to work. But it gives them the tools. They're going to leave there with a toolbox full of stuff to work in their marriage, just like they'll get in our book. They'll get a toolbox full of stuff that they can work in their marriage, and it will improve their marriage relationship. And without a doubt, no doubt.
So for instance, last night we started a small group, a small marriage group.
4 couples.
4 couples. And a couple of the couples go to a church here in Southern California that we go to, one of the largest churches in the area. And they were talking about last night, you know, they're not doing anything like this in the church. There's no marriage ministry in these churches. We were talking about, you know, they have divorce care and they have, you know, celebration recovery, but yet they're not doing marriage ministries. And so we're really passionate about that. We want, you know, we want to provide help for marriages.
They're on the mission to, a lot of the churches are on the mission to go to other countries and serve those people, which is great. I have no issue with that. But why would we not be on the mission of marriages? I mean, God created it first, right?
It's actually a really good point. It's almost like our current healthcare system, which is more sick care. It's not wellness care.
I said that last night, Larry.
Did you? Look at that.
I said insurance provides for all the sick stuff, but
and when we do these marriage events across the country, we do a critique at the end, and then we hand it to the church, and it's a gift because on the critique it shows people that want more marriage events like this, or people that want to serve in marriage ministry. And at every one of those events, there's usually 5 or 6 couples that both want to serve in marriage. So there's your marriage ministry team. You don't have to pay for it, and we would help them grow a ministry if they wanted to. We did that at our big church back in Southeast Washington for 9 years. So we realized what's possible, and if we could get marriages on the right track in this country, one marriage at a time. We're Family Life affiliate staff too, so we're very connected to Family Life, and they're a great company that is really impacting marriages all over the world.
That's really cool. Let me ask you this: is, you know, when it comes to you mentioned accountability groups for men. I wanted to ask you from a marriage perspective, Kath, story I'm telling myself is you probably have a circle of really tight knit friends or women that you do life with that share in the same probably core values that you do with your marriage, your faith, and everything else. And then Tim, for you, I would expect the same. And if the answer to those questions is yes, why is that so important?
Well, you need that encouragement. And, you know, I tell a lot of women who are really struggling in their marriages, I ask them, like, who are they talking to? Yeah. And there's a lot of women are saying, you know, there's these friends are encouraging me to get out of my marriage or leave my husband. And I say, those are not the kind of friends you want. I mean, you want those girlfriends who are going to encourage you. They're going to build you up. They're not going to talk. It's a place that you can maybe say some things that you need to about your husband, but yet they're not going to think bad of your husband. It's a safe place. And we all need that encouragement. And we need to be surrounded with those for women who are thinking the same way as us. But the minute you've got a girlfriend that's saying, you know, you need to leave him, or, you know, starts going into that, that's not a good girlfriend. And the same with the guys.
Same with the guys. Yeah. The guys in my life, I have several guys in my life, and it seems like you're always adding because there's just always somebody that needs some help. And I would always tell any guy, like the guy you're talking to, dude, you need to work on yourself. You got to grow yourself, because, you know, and they'll say, yeah, my wife this and wife that, my wife this. Yeah, I get that, but you're saying she's the problem, but could you be 10% of the problem? And well, I guess I could be 10. Well, could you be 20? And well, maybe I could be 20. And I usually don't go past that. And I said, well, why don't you just work on the 20% on you to change that and see if that helps move her around the corner. And I'll even talk with long-term Christians. They have issues too. I mean, and I have issues from time to time too, and I'll talk to them about it. But like last night, one of the guys says, "There's no doubt we can see how you love and nurture Kath, and how you want to protect her and take care of her. There's no doubt your love for her." Well, I want people that see us to see Christ in us. I want them to see that in our marriage, in everything we do. When you look at our video, we played it for the group last night. One of the videos is a 3-minute video of our grandkids. We could ship it to you, but it's in the book, so you can get it in the book. But this video shows our grandkids what it looks like to be married. All of them talked about us and our marriage. And there are grandkids, even the 5-year-old.
We got our little 5-year-old granddaughter says in the video, she says, "I want to drink coffee with my husband every day." And she sees her granny and papa do that.
Yeah, we sit and talk and read the Bible, and that's what we do. And she can sit there. All of our grandkids or our kids are welcome to do that. We do it whether they're here with us or whether they're not. We do it every day, no matter what. And they sit sometimes and just listen. But that modeling, imagine what that does. She's at 5 years old. I want to drink coffee with my husband. Well, it's more than the coffee. We know that, but how are they going to see that?
See, that's what I think. I really, really want more men who listen to this show to be thinking about that. So, I don't know if I'm sure you guys are probably in the same camp that I am, but that Jessica and I are in, which is I have 4 boys. I have 4 young men. And the way that I look at it is I have to teach, it's my responsibility to teach 4 young men, this is how you love, honor, and respect your wife. Like, and this is the way you communicate. It's out of love. I'm very, very publicly affectionate with my wife, and the compliments I give her purposely in front of my kids because I want them to see that. And luckily, like, I had a great grandfather who really took me under his wing, who really showed me what it meant he loved my grandmother like that. And that was a front row seat. I loved being over there as a kid because, like, it's kind of like what your grandkids are talking about. I loved being over there as a kid because it made me feel really safe to be there. Like, to see them love each other and to see how affectionate they were with each other. And my grandfather always, like, just had this look of he adored my grandmother, and he was a manly, actually, Tim, he kind of reminds me of you. He was like a manly man with like a very deep voice, and like, and if you ever pissed him off, which was very rare, all he had to do is raise his voice and you're like, I give up. I give up. Yeah.
Tim's kind of that.
But my wife is the exact same way. My wife shares in that responsibility. She's like, I need to show these young men what it looks like for a woman to respect and appreciate and honor, her man, because I don't want knucklehead girls coming in and treating my kids like crap. Right. I want to set the bar very high of, this is how you speak to a man. This is how you love your man. This is how you're affectionate with your man. All these things that are so important. I'm curious. I know we need to wrap up here soon, but I'm curious. I know we've spoken a lot about the faith-based aspect of this, which I've thoroughly loved. You guys, though, mentioned earlier on, about 10 minutes ago, tools that, when you do these conferences and whatnot, that by the end of the first day, they have a toolbox, they have a toolkit, and you've seen it even as you look at the audience, that now they're maybe holding hands, or they're more affectionate with each other, they're not on their phones. But what tools in particular do you guys teach that you think are most effective?
Well, I want to start with our number one goal at our conferences is that people see the need for Christ, and we have people give their lives to Christ at the conferences. And that varies because we are very transparent about what happened and what we did and what we needed.
At the last conference, 10 people gave their lives to Jesus, and one of the couples even got baptized the next Sunday. We never had that happen before.
Yeah, yeah.
In church, the very next day, they got baptized.
So that is our ultimate message, is that, you can't do this alone. You can't have a thriving marriage without Christ. So that's number one. And then we go into talking about praying together and reading God's word. And then there's also
getting in a small group.
Being in fellowship, being in a small group, your communication with each other, not keeping secrets from each other.
I would say, as a man, get a mentor that's older than you, and then maybe mentor somebody else that's younger too, because you got to give it back. And then the praying together are just so huge. I mean, we have You have these kids. We pray for our kids and our grandkids from age down. Not every day. Each one gets a day. And so, like our granddaughter, who's 3, for example, we just talked about. We pray for her to know Jesus. We pray for her parents to teach her about Jesus. We pray for God to create a young man, if he hasn't done it already, that's waiting for her, that's going to know Jesus, and they're going to grow together in Jesus Christ and serve him the rest of their lives, and their kids. We're praying for her kids and her husband at 5 years old. And so those are things that we would have never even thought of, but we believe God hears all of our prayers.
Well, and what we do with our most of them are teenagers, our grandkids, and so lots of times we'll pray for them, and one of us will text one of the grandkids and tell them that Granny and Papa are praying for you. Is there anything specific we can be praying for you? And so that really keeps our communication. We have a good relationship with our grandkids. We missed a lot with our kids, but it's really cool because our grandkids only know Granny and Papa as the new creations.
Our kids were all in their 20s, and we had a lot of we had to ask for a lot of forgiveness.
And our kids are pretty amazing too.
We're all in
For
their
what
20s
they
when
went
we got
through.
saved. Yeah.
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 Our kids are all saved, and
And I guess, how did they respond to all the, stuff that you guys shared?
Well, it's in the book, but in the videos too.
the
But
kids talk candidly in
they
the
thought it was
videos.
pretty weird at the start. They thought
Yeah.
it was just another one of those self-help things that mom and dad will fall away from later, and they talk candidly about
But
it.
it wasn't weird that we were going to church, because we went to church with our kids. We were in a Lutheran church, that wasn't, the church thing wasn't, but being born again and being saved, and that was a new thing, that was like
And they didn't think it was going to last.
No, they didn't think it was going to last.
I ran a car. I owned a BMW dealership, and I was praying with customers. I closed on Sundays. The paintings you see back on the wall back there, the Fruit of the Spirit paintings. There's a story about that in the book. But the car pictures went off the wall. The paintings went up. We had TVs with ESPN on. I took all the ESPN off, and put scriptures on the wall. This is a BMW dealership, and we were selling a lot of cars. So everything changed. We drastically changed.
It was radical.
But you know what? We sold more cars, and things got crazy. So and ultimately we had to, because it got in the way of marriage ministry, we had to sell the dealership, and we sold it because it just wasn't a good fit for it. It wasn't as important to me as my marriage and doing different things. So that we just did a bunch of changes. I was at 35 years in the car business and got out of it. And it's just that was what I was known for until then.
Man, that's pretty unreal. It really is.
Wait till you read the book.
Right. So let me ask you one. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I see with couples is this communication breakdown. They just don't know how to talk to each other. And I think, quite frankly, that men and women just communicate differently, right? And we have different needs. Men need to be respected and appreciated. There's a need for validation. Women, it's seen, heard, safe, cherished, loved, all those things. And at times we're not the best at fulfilling each other's needs, and we're not the best at communicating with each other. But from a communication standpoint, how do you advise people, or what advice would you guys give when it comes to communication?
I think the biggest thing is letting, I have to really let Tim know what I need. And our communication was so bad, and mainly because I didn't talk. I internalized everything, and I felt like Tim was going to, if I had anything to say, he was going to change my mind on it, and he was going to take control of the situation. So I just didn't communicate. So now I have to really be intentional about, like, if I really want to talk to Tim about something, I have to let him know, babe, I need to talk to you about this, and I need you to listen to me. I don't want you to fix anything. I don't even want your advice right now. Like, just let me process this. And we've worked through that. You have to be intentional. Once again, it's work in the marriage, and Tim's gotten a lot better. I mean, it's funny because I can see his wheels turning, and
I'm a very quick processor.
and he'll
lightning.
And he'll listen, and he'll be like, so do you want me to give you an idea? And I'll be like, no, I don't want anything right now. And then I'll come back to him and say, yeah, I want to know what you think about this. But it's being intentional and really letting your spouse know what you need. Because we spent years in a counselor's office. The counselors asked me, Kathy, what do you want? What do you need? And I didn't even know.
And I want to add to that, men need to lead and wives need to encourage. Kath is my greatest encourager. She's my cheerleader. And we have to lead. That doesn't mean we're overbearing. That doesn't mean we don't hear our wives. We have to hear everything they say, and they have to know they're heard. It's not one thing. Well, my wife, I hear my wife. Well, does she think that? Yeah. It's kind of like, I love my wife. Well, does she feel loved? Are you willing to ask her that right now? How are you doing in the love you department? Are you willing to say, yeah, how am I doing in loving you? And then rather than her throw a whole bunch of things out, can you give me one thing that I could do to love you better? Not 20 things, just one thing. Yeah. And then do it. I tell guys to do it. But that's why we built our book the way we did too. You have to have things to start communications. Like after everyone, our chapters are very small. And after each chapter, there's things called questions for transformation. And they're questions to get the couples to start to talk. And you got to give each other space and not get angry and realize, oh, I didn't know that, and ask more. Tell me more about that. Yeah. And those are the kind of things that you got to do when you're talking with your spouse, because you have to give them, you have to listen, and they have to be heard.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so powerful. Just to recap a couple of things here is, number one, great leaders, one of the greatest traits of any leader is they're really good listeners.
Right.
I mean, they talk less and they listen more. Right.
Totally agree.
Kath, I need to really applaud you because, and this can happen on both sides, not just the wife's side, not just the woman's side, but the man's side too. I think one of the things that will destroy a marriage more than anything are the expectations that aren't said. It's the needs or the wants that are never said. I need you to, you should know that. You should figure that out. I remember, my mom's been married 3 times, and she even, raised me like this. I mean, she did the best she could with what she had. I mean, I think my grandmother was a lot like this. Like, I shouldn't have to tell you what to do. I shouldn't have to tell you what needs to be done. And I'm like, no, it's like, even when Jessica and I, when our kids, like, we tell them like, hey, go clean your room. Well, their version of clean and our version of clean is very different. And she's like, I can't believe the kids didn't clean their room. Or I'll say it. And then we'll catch each other and be like, but do they actually really know what good looks like? Do they know what we expect? Because have we been clear about that? Or do we just say, go clean your room, and it's just up for whatever, right? But I love that fact that you are clear with what it is that you need and want. Because here's the cool thing from a man's perspective. Like, Jessica does that to me too. She'll say, I need to talk to you, but I really don't want advice. I just need you to hear me. Do you know what a breath of fresh air that is for me? Like, as a guy, that the fact that I'm like, oh, I can do that. But if she doesn't tell me that, then I'm like, while she's talking to me, I find myself guessing, like,
we're fixers.
You want me to, like, should I? And then, but when she tells me, I just need you to listen, then I'm like, I just go into listen mode. Yeah. Like, I don't even start to process anything. I just go into listen mode, and I go into like, what more can I ask to help her talk more about this? Right. Mm-hmm. Which is a lot of clarity, but I think a lot of people don't do that. I think they automatically assume, well, he should know or she should know. But they don't. No one is a mind reader. Here's the other thing too. I think women get a really bad rap with this, because guys are like, I don't know what she wants. Like, and I'll be like, well, is she telling you? Well, no. Are you telling her? Like, because guys can be just as bad about it. Like, I told my wife just the other day, it's very blunt, to the point. And she goes, yeah, and we're really open with this stuff. And she was asking me yesterday, she's like, what's on your mind? I was like, I really want to have sex with you soon.
I knew this was a sex thing.
And she's like, she just started laughing. She's like, well, that was to the point. I was like, well, if I don't tell you what's on my mind, if I don't tell you what it is that I want, like, and I told her, I was like, I don't expect you to, like, just because I want it, it doesn't mean like I expect you to like do something about it right away. I'm just stating, you asked me what's on my mind, I'm just stating it. You do what you want. And she even told me, she's like, I appreciate you telling me that. Well, like, now I know. Like, I wouldn't be able to read your mind.
And that's funny because you adding on, I just needed to say that, I'm not expecting anything. That's what you had to say. And it's so funny because right before this podcast,
I wonder if you're going to go there.
Right before this podcast, we were talking about sex this morning, and
I was assuming a couple things.
And Tim had some stuff he had to do on his computer. I was trying to set up this computer, and I had to go get ready.
I grabbed all this stuff, kind of set it
up. And so Tim comes in the bedroom like,
let's go.
Looking at me, and I'm like, did you look at the clock? Do you see what time it is? We have a podcast. And he said, like, don't snap at me. And he walks out, and I was like, okay. I said, babe, get back in here. I said, we need to talk about this. I have this much time. I didn't mean to snap at you. He didn't mean to snap at me. But it's just like that. It's that communication thing that can happen so fast.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That is so true.
And early on, you said we love each other more now than ever. I keep on wanting to pinch myself. I realize that our love is growing at 42 years of marriage. It's not done.
Yeah.
And I have, I have no idea how God could make it better, but he just somehow does it. And I wake up every morning so thankful that I got to sleep with Kath all night and that she had a good night's sleep. I mean, it's just, you get to where you're so thankful for this relationship with this going like in between you.
And we almost missed it.
Yeah, we almost missed it.
Yeah. So I'm just doing the math. Are you guys 60?
I'm 62, Kath 60.
I just turned 60. Just had my 60th.
You guys look like, when you say 42 years of marriage, you guys look amazing. You really, really do. I mean, both you guys, like you look unreal. So like, I don't know what kind of vitamins y'all are taking, or maybe there's something in the water.
A lot of vitamins.
A ton of supplements.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, you guys truly look happy. You really, really do. And I just want to, I want, as we wrap this up, I want to hit like the double down button. Like if I could actually slam it, I want everyone who is listening to this podcast, no matter what your situation is, because you guys have unpacked a lot, like alcohol, drug use, lying, affairs. And here you are, you wrote a book about it, and you're teaching other people how to salvage their relationship, not just salvage them, but make their relationships great, right? Make their relationships unbreakable, right?
Yep.
And that's what's really cool. So no matter what your situation is, you guys are living proof that if you're willing to fix it, it can be fixed, and it can actually be better.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up here, and just where can the men find you, and what's the best way to connect with you guys?
Well, I'll do me first, and I'd say men contact me, and don't ask my wife for advice. I'd say ladies contact Kath, and my
well, probably the War Room.
WarRoomMinistries.com. We have a website. We also have Tim at WarRoomMinistries.com is my email, and then same with Kath, Kathy at WarRoomMinistries.com, and then her email. That's her email too. So
and all the information is in the book, Sex on the First Date.
Yep, Sex on the First Date.
Get our book, and I think all marriages will be blessed by it.
Yep, and we have Kath's a scheduler, but we do marriage events all over the country, and we charge our expenses, but we don't charge ourselves. So it's we do this out of obedience, and we love to go do this. We can only do it so many times a year because we want it to be fresh every time we go. We don't want to make it a job. We want to have joy while we do it, and we want to impact marriages for the Lord. But we definitely would come to your area and do this. So if there's a pastor or whatever, or somebody in the church that has the ability that would like us to come, we would be interested, no matter where it is. We were in North Carolina last July. We were in Puerto Rico last February. We were also in Mount Juliet, Tennessee last February. We've been as far as Kona, Hawaii. We go all over for these events, and every place in between.
Very cool. You guys coming to St. Louis anytime soon, or close?
Well, we sure could. If we had set up there, we would help you.
If we had a reason to come,
and we would also help you make a successful event where it didn't cost the church or the place that had it. We've had it at wedding venues, at people's houses. we're going to be doing one March 9th. There'll be around 25 couples at somebody's house up in Villa Park, California. That'll be our third time there. But we'd love to go to St. Louis. I know a great left-handed pitcher that has a house there, Todd Worrell.
Oh
And
my God. I remember Todd.
Todd is where
Yeah.
we go pheasant hunting in South Dakota. So we got to know
Ah,
him and Jamie. They've also been married 42 years.
That's so funny, man. I remember when Todd pitched for us. I think it was during the World Series, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, he was. He was Cy Young
Yeah.
Award winner. Yeah.
That's right. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, it's huge Cardinal territory down here. Well, guys, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes. Head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday 143 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday 143 for this show. Talking to Tim and Kathy Bush. You guys obviously making marriages better. And I wish you guys the best of luck. And thank you so much for coming on today. This was absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
You
Thank
bet.
you so much.